Good evening and welcome again to All Things Victorian. I'm your hostess, Victoriana Lady Lisa. I have such an exciting show tonight. One of the subjects that's near and dear to my heart, and I know a lot of you as well, the subject of collecting antiques. That's why we're here. That's why we love All Things Victorian. I started collecting when I was 15 years old. I tell everyone it's a sickness. And I'm in good company. I have a gentleman here tonight by the name of Henry Jensen of Henry Jensen's Antiques. He's brought some of his treasures with him. He's going to give us a little overview in Antiques 101, and he has some wonderful, wonderful stories to share. So Henry, I would like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
I can't wait.
We're going to have a good time with this. I know there's so much to talk about. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get involved in collecting antiques?
That's a wonderful question, and no one ever asks. So
Really?
I'm just bubbling, ready to go. When I was about 15 years old, my father was a contractor, did roofing, siding, etc. Unfortunately, I had to be his cleanup guy because I was cheap. We did a house in Needham, the Carter Little Liverpill family homestead. And we were up taking the fascia boards off in the old gutters, and as soon as the fascia boards came off, the bottles started raining out of the gutters. I was upset because I'm the cleanup kid. Here's more stuff on the ground for me to deal with.
Wow.
So I picked them all up. That afternoon on the way home, I had put one of the bottles aside for myself, not knowing anything about it. I liked the color. Somebody looked in the back of my father's truck and offered him $50 for the bottles that were in the truck. Now I'm blown away.
Wow.
I mean, I'm not making $50 in 3 days of cleanup.
Yes.
He's offered me $50 for a box of bottles. What were they? Why were they? How can I get more? Well, this was one of the bottles that came out of it, and it's a fascinating bottle. Every bottle that fell out of that attic was corked and filled with liquid.
Really?
Do you know why?
I'm thinking
In the eaves.
keep the cold out?
Nope, it was early fire alarm system. In the early days, if you had a fire and you were asleep, these would be bursting in the eaves or in the walls. They'd pop, and that was your early fire alarm system.
Never heard that before. That's fascinating.
And this was an interesting bottle, only because it should never have survived. This is a Dr. Langley Herb Bitters bottle, which is a great bottle to start with, but when you see it up close, it's totally whittled. This hot glass was blown into a cold mold, the glass right away whittled. So that's
whittled is that bumpy.
Yes, it's a really bumpy look to it.
Yes, looks like it has a lot of bubbles in it.
Tons of bubbles, but again, this should not have survived because this has chunks of sand in it that should have burst this bottle as soon as it cooled. This bottle should have been burst. This bottle, when it fell 2 stories out of an attic, should have burst.
Wow.
This has a long life, this bottle. So from there, I learned that all I had to do was go find an old farmhouse. Every old place had a dump. Everybody had their own dump in the 19th century, so you'd only have to go out to an area and find out where the cows and kids didn't get into. That's where they put the rubbish. I got so good at walking through the woods that just at the bottom of my feet, I could feel a dump under the ground.
That's amazing.
You could just feel the consistency of solid earth versus earth that's been stirred up. Kick the leaves aside, now you start to see the springs and the china. Then you'd lay out your line. See, I did it like an archaeologist. I grew up with National Geographic, and I was fascinated, always wanted to dig. What could you dig around here? So I became an urban archaeologist. I was in everybody's dump, outhouses, which is another story for another time.
Be a good one.
And it became a business because you could actually sell these. I mean, people would buy these things from you. So you could go and spend 3 days in a dump and dig up $2 worth of bottles, or the right dump, you could spend 10 minutes and dig up $500 worth of bottles, depending on the dump. And so that's what led me into this business, and it's been a hoot ever since. Now, naturally, I did go to college. I became a history teacher, which worked well with the antiques. Started a school for ED teenagers. And in a classroom of 9, you'd have 5 different reading abilities, so I taught with objects. Hence, I collected more and more. So I was the best history teacher these kids ever had.
I am sure you were. Yes.
But as time went on, your tastes changed. You couldn't make a living on bottles. So you started to look at lots of other things. I had a paper route back when I was 16 years old, and a lot of the elderly women thought I was such a cute kid, they'd let me go in their cellars and attics to look for bottles. You'd never find a bottle, but you'd see a dusty phonograph or something else old, so I'd go to Todd Farm or something like that, and I'd see a phonograph for $100. So I'd go back. I'd go back and ask the woman if I could mow her lawn for the summer for that object, which always worked, but most of the time, I'd take the object out. I'd mow all summer and get $30 for the object, but you learned.
Yes.
You learned cellars and attics were the place.
Great education.
And now, I'm fortunate enough to be associated with many different council of agings, attorneys. Brooksby Village in Peabody has used me for 14 years. So it just keeps perpetuating. It's something, as you know, you will never retire from. The interest in this will keep you till the end.
Yes, that's why I said I call it a sickness, but it's a wonderful sickness.
People ask me, when are you going to retire? I says, as long as I can bring my walker up to your jewelry drawer, I'm all set.
A man after my own heart. Well, let's talk a little bit about taking care of some of these antique pieces.
Well,
what should you or shouldn't you do?
Well, for a majority of these things, when you pick them up like this, you know to leave them alone. It's when you get into furniture, that's always a problem for people because they don't know whether they should clean it or not clean it.
Right.
The rule of thumb is if it's middle 1800s or earlier, if it's got original old paint, original old stenciling, leave it alone. See, back in the 70s, everybody was interested in colonial pine, colonial maple. The colonial look was everywhere, so everybody stripped.
Oh, no.
Everybody took their old red painted blanket chest. I did it.
Oh.
My red painted blanket chest was dated 1796 on the back in the red. So I worked a week stripping the white, the gray, the blue, and I got down to the red, and I said, just one more layer. Never associated the color with the date on the back. I stripped it down to beautiful honey pine.
Oh.
Big mistake. After 1850s, 1860s, when you get into the gnarly old alligated finish, everybody has oak furniture from the turn of the century, and they're always asking me, I know I'm not supposed to touch it. What do you mean? Touch it. Have fun. Make it beautiful. I wouldn't have that black, dark, dirty oak in my house.
Yes.
You can refinish it because that bureau you're concerned about, there's $5 million out there. But the 1790 sideboard with the original red paint on it, there's probably 3 in existence.
Exactly.
And I found that out back in the 80s. I was lucky enough to buy a sideboard out of a chicken coop. Now this sideboard had been in the chicken coop at least 100 years. So every drawer being opened was filled with nests.
Oh,
the
my.
dung was this high on the top of the thing.
Oh, boy.
Now I knew it was old. I paid $80 for it. People were laughing at me. Who would want that thing? So I got it home and I worked on it for about 2 weeks. Now it came out gorgeous. I was able to sell it for $1,200. Now that excited me, but now before I sold it, somebody had heard I had this and came over and looked at it. They pulled out a drawer and they looked in a certain place and found a signature.
Oh.
And he told me, well, that was what I was afraid of. You just refinished a piece that is unknown by this maker. I would have paid you $6,000 out of the chicken coop just the way it was, because what he would have done was slowly scraped off all the chicken dung nests, etc., down to the dirty black finish, and he would have just re-amalgamated the original finish to smooth it all out, get all the hair off the feathers, etc.
Sure.
But it would have still had the original finish. Maybe to you and I it would have been ugly, but for the purist, that was his piece of work. So I worked 2 weeks to make $1,200. I could have delivered it to this person and made $6,000.
Wow.
So again, all of us have learned the hard way about refinishing.
Yes.
But again, your oak and stuff like that, if it's going to make you happier, pleasing in the home, refinish it. You don't need it. Things like this, these small things, these usually come like this. So you don't want to, you don't want to take a scrimshaw whale's tooth and buff it. This yellow patina is what you want.
Right.
This is an unusual pair because it's matched 1860s with the nautical theme. They came together out of a home. I was very lucky to buy them. And, if you know scrimshaw, it's a very popular collectible, but you have to know what it is. I see people from appraisal days bring me fake stuff all the time, and they're angry when I tell them it's fake. And they prove it. Prove that's fake. All right? Take 2 minutes. Pliers, safety pin, and a Bic lighter. Just get that pin real hot. Turn around the back and do this with that hot needle. If it's bone or ivory, nothing happens. If it's celluloid,
it'll go right through it.
You can smell it. It curls right up.
Very, very, very interesting.
I had a call a couple years ago. A woman had a major collection of Chinese statues, all 3 to 4 feet high. Husband spent a fortune on them because he knew he was going to pass away and wanted to leave his wife something serious. I was referred to the house. I get down there. They're laying all over the floor. What a collection. So I get down and I pull out my lighter, Bic lighter, safety pin, etc. Woman goes, "What are you doing?" "I want to see if they're real." Well, this woman, she's having a heart attack. "What do you mean real?" I never heard of such a thing. Of course they're real.
Sure.
After I finished with my needle, 2 of 48 were real.
Wow.
To think of what those couple of antique dealers, she said, these guys were really taking care of my husband, giving him the best prices. They were taking care of him all right.
Oh.
It was so sad.
That's a shame.
I made her an offer of $500 for the collection, and she made me take it. She didn't want to see him. But you can't dispute that needle.
Right. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yes.
Here's a particularly very rare piece of scrimshaw. This, again, found in a rubbish can in Beverly. And this is as nice as any in the Peabody Essex Museum because of the amount of ships, the polychrome paint, and Lady Liberty standing at the dock with the flag. That's a very patriotic symbol, Lady Liberty. To have all the ships, etc. Now, I think I told you what this was.
No, I didn't.
You didn't hear that part of the talk?
I didn't get that part of the talk, no.
Can you guess what this might be? This is what the sailor in 1852 carved for his sweetie when he got home. Corset busk. This is one of those things.
No, I didn't hear that. I would have remembered that.
This is one of those things that went into the corset.
Well, the corset busk is the wider one in the front.
Yep.
And then the boning would be thinner.
Yep. And
that's incredible.
And you see that, what sticks out is that scene in Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
Where she's pulling on the straps and tightening and tightening. Those are all bone stays all the way around that tighten it up. And this was a wonderful gift for his sweetie when he got home. I happen to know what voyage, what ship, etc. Everything
that's
about
wonderful.
Again,
now that's called provenance for people that don't know.
Yeah. In antiques, people can always tell you these belong to Abraham Lincoln. My father, my grandfather have always heard that story. Well, yes, it's a wonderful story. Show me a photo of Abraham Lincoln holding these, and it's more weight.
You have to have the proof.
Yes.
That's the provenance of the history.
Provenance adds so much to something
when
you know who owned it. I mean, even the hat you wear, you could have found that belonged to Eleanor Roosevelt. It makes it so much more valuable. And that's the name of this business. And so I've been very fortunate where I do house calls. I don't go to auctions, antique shops, etc. I'm so busy in homes, I'm able to get the provenance because people want to share. Their kids aren't interested. But
Sadly
this
true.
antique dealer, he's interested.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And that was another question that we always talk about, is the lack of interest today with, the young people.
Yes, yes.
It's affected your business. It's affected my antique business terribly. The China sets I used to buy, beautiful Limoges sets from Grandma, can't sell them in the shops anymore. Nobody wants to buy them. Silver sets, I buy them every week for scrap, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
I tell the person I'm buying it for, and it's really funny that I do that, because every once in a while somebody will pull it back, but I tell them, this is going to get melted. I don't know why I do that. I feel they should know.
Sure.
Most of them say, listen, I've asked the daughter 6 times, she doesn't want it, go.
Yes.
But still I do mention it.
Yes.
But young people just aren't interested. They want to go to Crate and Barrel, IKEA, the spit and polish of that new stuff is wonderful. What they don't understand, the minute they get that out of the store, they have lost money.
Absolutely.
They couldn't turn around and give it back for what they paid. This kind of material,
an investment.
if you pay $100 for this, you're always going to get your $100 back, if not more.
Right, true. I know for myself, I've been very fortunate, and I'm very grateful for many, many donations over the years to my traveling museum collection. And I'm always amazed when people tell me, I've asked my children and my grandchildren, and they don't want it.
Right.
And I had a wonderful lady give me items, and she had DAR heritage, Daughters of the American Revolution. And she had wonderful pictures of her grandfather when he was a year old, wearing these cute little button baby boots. She had the boots. She also had a picture of him. He lived to be 100 years old. All types of family pieces. They didn't want them. Yeah. So I was honored. I said, I'm delighted to have them, and I'm working on my second book, Victorian and Edwardian Fashions, so I'll be able to incorporate some of the pieces that she's donated to me, and some others here on Cape Ann.
And that makes
I treasure them.
So excited.
Oh, she was in tears when I told her I'm going to put these
you're willing
in my
to pass
book.
them on.
Yeah.
You'll take your time to pass my family.
Yes.
I mean, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I count it a privilege. I really love to try to preserve history as much as possible. And I got started in this. I know some of the viewers know when they've watched the previous episodes. When I was in grade school, I found out that my grandfather was a quartermaster sergeant in the Union Army. My grandmother had showed me his picture in uniform, and I just thought that was great. And I asked her if she had any other photos like that. So she brought a box out. We spent the afternoon, and I was hooked. I couldn't get enough about the 19th century, and thankfully I had grandmothers and aunts that lived well into their 90s. So I wrote down a lot of the family stories, a lot of the recipes.
Did you save the box with the photographs and things like that in it?
Well, I saved what she gave to me.
Okay.
Some of it was passed down to other family members, but I did get quite a bit.
That's my largest collection.
I
now
really cherish them.
Is the Civil War. I have probably the largest Civil War document collection on the North Shore. I've been collecting letters for years. Probably my best finds have been 2 signed Lincoln photographs.
Oh,
Mr. Lincoln did not like to sign photographs.
that's amazing.
So you have to be somebody important to get him to sign. And I found 2 in my career. And the first one I sent out to be authenticated, and it came back, it's the 56th known. So there aren't very many known. And the last one I found is unknown, because I found it in context. People say, how do you know this is real? Half the stuff I get, people go, how do you know it's real? Well, number one, I buy it in situ, which means in context. I'm going through the Civil War trunk in the attic. I'm picking up all the letters, the documents, the uniforms. So when I find something signed by Lincoln or somebody else, it wasn't salted there to impress me. It's actually from this Civil War soldier. And again, families don't care. One of my biggest letter collections, I was in an attic with a gentleman who's showing me the trunk he refinished. Civil War era trunk, spent a lot of time refinishing it. Over here's the rubbish bag, and I can see the envelopes pouring out.
Oh my
now
goodness.
you can tell from the color of the envelope, the color of the stamp, and the style of writing, it's Civil War letters. So I go pick one up. Now he's still talking about this trunk. Now he's getting concerned. What's my head in the bag for? I bring him a letter out and I showed him, April 1862, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And he goes, so it's a letter from my great-great-grandfather. Why would you want that?
Oh,
he didn't get
goodness.
it. So I offered him $300 for the bag. And he goes, boy, you're a sorry sort. If you like that, you should have seen what come out of his trunk last week. That was when the uniforms went in the rubbish, etc.
No.
You know, they had moth holes. So what would you do with them?
Oh, gosh, that just about kills me to hear stories like
all
that.
the time. All the time.
But
That's
right.
why I
It's
do
true.
that talk called Treasures from the Trash.
Yes.
You know, you go to somebody's home and they're already thinking, we know what he wants, so let's get going. Let's start cleaning up. So you get to the house call, there in the rubbish are the best things you've seen in 10 years. You go in the house, it's half bags of Depends, broken Hummels, things like that. But the serious stuff is in the rubbish. This right here was in a rubbish can in Salem. There were 5 letters from Nathaniel Hawthorne.
Oh, my word.
And they were wonderful letters because they weren't just to people saying, I can't do dinner or this. These are to his publisher writing to make sure his sister-in-law gets a copy of the latest book that just came out, etc. But again, in the rubbish. How I recognize it. This one wasn't framed. I just recognized the old paper on the top of the rubbish can. Somebody dumped a box from the attic. And this one had 5 letters from Nathaniel Hawthorne. I was thrilled.
That is truly amazing.
And I had it framed, which is another one of our topics on protecting
Please tell
antiques.
us about the frames.
Is all acid-free material. It's inexpensive. It will save all of your watercolors, old papers, prints, etc.
Yes.
At the Rockport Art Association Appraisal Day we just did, someone brought in a beautiful etching by a Rockport artist. Totally brown. She thought that's the way it was supposed to be. You turn it around, there's the old wood. There's the slits between the slats, and when you turned it around here, you could see the brown lines coming up where the air got through the slats. That wood on the back, that old paper, that old cardboard, all leaches acid. So that if you look up at an old family watercolor, a old deed or whatever, you'll notice it's all yellowed. It didn't start out yellowed. That's your backing. Take that stuff to your local framer. You'll be surprised. Doesn't cost that much. You'll protect it for your family forever after. But you leave it with that wood on the back, it's slowly going to get yellower, yellower, and yellower.
That's good advice because people don't know when they should have something changed or touched up or replaced, and
Well,
when they
you're
shouldn't.
not touching the document up. Now,
Right.
if you have a wonderful watercolor that's already the lines, the knot holes, etc., that can be fixed. It's expensive.
Okay.
I have a friend in Marblehead, Rob Kipp, who he restores paper. So you can take something covered in knot holes, and when you get it back, it's like brand new. It's done in liquid. I don't know how he does it, but it can be preserved. But when you're changing one of those, you're really not touching the item. You're just the
You're
backing,
getting rid of the backing.
Yeah. and that saves it.
Yes. Another question I wanted you to answer for me. What should people do with old ephemera letters with stamps on? I see so often the stamps are cut off. What do you feel about that?
Oh, that kills me. I can rave about that for days. I can't tell you how many postcard collections I go to look at. You'll walk in, there'll be 300 to 500 postcards. They're the right period, pre-1920 American. Town scenes, etc. Everybody loves them. But I get into the house and I can see from across the room the pile of green stamps next to it, where they figure they're going to make twice the money on me. I'm an antique dealer, so they're going to get twice the money on me. So they just finished cutting all that 1 cent stamp off. Now they got a postcard. I tell them, start your fires with it. Burn them. You killed it. That 1 cent stamp, they developed this stamp because of the advent of the postcard. The postcards, they made billions of them, and they made millions of that 1 cent stamp. It's worthless. So now you can throw the stamps away, you throw the postcard. When you have something like that, again, you can get acid-free little plastic sleeves. That's the right word. And they come in all different sizes. You can get them from magazine size to postcard size. And that protects your family love letters, etc.
Family photos.
All
yes,
that
all
stuff.
Of that.
You know, it's in Mylar. It's, you know, you can look at all up on the internet. Internet's fantastic for that. Just look for acid-free paper, acid-free envelopes, plastic, sleeving, etc. It's out there all over the place.
I use the acid-free tissue paper, and there's acid-free boxes that are available that I store my clothing in, my antique clothing and textiles and things like that. So
I don't understand about textiles. That's one of the fields that I run into it. I have no idea. I know it's old. Don't know what to do with it.
Just give me a call. That's my forte, my area of expertise.
Well, now I know
Victorian and Edwardian
when
clothing
when
and
I see those hats, I shouldn't run away from them.
No. Tell us about this little guy. This little guy right here.
Again, another trash find. This is called the Tammany Bank. This dates about 1880, 1885, when they had all the problems in government with Tammany Hall. The politicians were so crooked, it was amazing. So they developed this bank, and what he does is he'll take your coin, and instead of putting it into the public where it's supposed to go, it quickly goes in his pocket, and watch his head. He just nods and goes, "Thank you."
Oh, boy.
And it goes into his own pocket. The graft was incredible. Now, this was in a rubbish can because somebody had lost the plate on the bottom that keeps the money in. So they threw it out. What's nice about that, you don't see too many with this amount of the original paint. And, you know, again, you'll find things like this. I find them with door stops all the time. People have a nice bird, dog, whatever. It's got a little peeling on it. They get out the Sears paint, and they just make a new dog, a new butter, a new basket of flowers.
They spray paint an old frame.
When those come in the appraisal days, I have all I can do. You know, the artwork might be nice, but it's that Sears gold paint you spray on that frame. It just kills it.
I know. It should be outlawed for antiques.
Well, people don't know, but there are things you just have to take your time and do the research.
If you're not sure, look it up online.
Look it up. Call somebody like me. Call somebody like you. Just ask, because if we don't know, we know the place to call.
That's right. If we're not sure, we can find another expert that
we
can get the information for them.
On my Civil War rant, I did want to point these out.
Okay, and just to let you know, we have about 2 minutes left. So
well, these are the first photo cases. This was your first plastic. This is gutta percha. Later on, you've probably seen all the gutta percha, collar cuffs, etc.
Yes,
but they started out making photo cases. This one's an Ambro type. That is a Daguerre type. This is the first photography made about 1840, 1845. This one's a little later during the Civil War. Fantastic images. Two brothers with their musical instruments.
They're lovely.
A Civil War flutist in his uniform. Very, very rare.
Very unusual to see.
I wish if I know who this was, that would triple the value of that item.
They are beautiful pieces. Yes.
Well, they're beautiful to you and I. My wife wants this stuff gone.
Oh, no.
Yeah, she's another.
Well, thankfully, John and I are on the same page there. We like antiques, and we're both very much into the Victorian.
I can't imagine.
York, this is Democracy Now!
2 hours ago, colleagues, I asked Mr. Kennedy to reconcile his many anti-vaccine statements with his handful of pro-vaccine statements. Instead, he gave us a word salad and ducked the issue.
During a confirmation hearing Wednesday, Senate Democrats grilled Robert F. Kennedy Jr., President Trump's pick to head the Department of Health and Human Services. We'll speak to Oregon Senator Ron Wyden, the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, about Kennedy. Also, today's confirmation hearing for Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's pick to be Director of National Intelligence, as well as the Trump administration's shocking reversal under enormous pressure to freeze all federal grants and loans. Plus, we get the latest from Washington after an American airline carrying 64 people collided with an Army helicopter near Reagan National Airport. No one is believed to have survived. Then to Gaza, where Hamas has released 8 more hostages. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Rescue workers in Washington, D.C. have launched a massive search operation in the Potomac after an American Airlines flight and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided midair late Wednesday, with both aircrafts crashing into the river. So far, no survivors have been found. At least 30 bodies have been pulled from the river. American Airlines Flight 5342 had 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board and was en route to the D.C. area, Reagan National Airport, from Wichita, Kansas. Several passengers were members of U.S. figure skating who were heading home after a training camp and the Nationals. The Black Hawk helicopter had 3 soldiers on board conducting a training flight. An investigation is underway by the National Transportation Safety Board, aided by the Federal Aviation Administration. On social media, President Trump called the crash, quote, a bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented, unquote. Just 1 week prior to Wednesday's deadly crash, Trump fired the head of the Transportation Security Administration and all members of the Aviation Security Advisory Committee. The crash comes just days after the head of the Federal Aviation Administration, Mike Whitaker, stepped down. FAA administrators usually serve 5-year terms. Trump has not named a replacement. Whitaker announced his planned departure in December after Elon Musk repeatedly attacked him on social media, tweeting he needs to resign. The White House Wednesday rescinded a memo from the Office of Management and Budget that briefly froze trillions of dollars of federal grants and loans, even though the money had already been appropriated by Congress. The order set off panic and mass confusion across the federal bureaucracy, briefly disrupting funding for Medicaid, housing, and other public services Tuesday before a federal judge put a temporary hold on the plan. On Wednesday, a second federal judge, U.S. District Judge Jack McConnell in Rhode Island, signaled he, too, would block the Trump administration from withholding federal disbursements, writing, quote, I am very concerned about the irreparable harm which has clearly been put forth, he said. On Wednesday, Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt insisted the reversal was not a rescission of the federal funding freeze and said the White House would continue to seek ways to eliminate funding for what it called woke ideologies. President Trump has signed the Laken-Riley Act into law, which allows federal immigration authorities to indefinitely detain undocumented immigrants arrested for certain nonviolent crimes without due process. 46 Democrats from the House, 12 from the Senate joined their Republican colleagues in voting in favor. At the signing ceremony for the first piece of legislation of a second term, President Trump announced plans to send, quote, the worst criminal aliens to Guantanamo Bay. The military was reportedly unaware of Trump's plan, which would require new infrastructure to house up to 30,000 people. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez said, quote, the U.S. government's decision to imprison migrants at the Guantanamo naval base in an enclave where it created torture and indefinite detention centers shows contempt for the human condition and international law, he said. Meanwhile, deportation flights to Latin America are continuing amidst Trump's escalating crackdown. Recently deported Guatemalans say the crackdown has targeted everyone in the immigrant community.
Trump said that he was only going to catch the criminals, but now the police are also collaborating with immigration. So if you are driving and there are 2 or 3 people in the car, they will get caught even if they are not criminals. They're taking everyone.
I left 2 children there, and now I'm here in Guatemala. I don't know how I can get them back. They took me away from my children. It's tough to live because I am a mother. I can't live without my children.
At least 4 U.S. military planes carrying deported people landed in Guatemala this week following Colombia's refusal to accept military deportation flights. Colombia instead sent its own aircraft to fly deportees home with dignity, they said. In more immigration news, Trump officials have rescinded the Biden administration's 18-month extension of TPS. That's temporary protected status for over 600,000 Venezuelans. The order means those affected only have protection under TPS until April and September of this year. The Senate has confirmed former Long Island Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin as head of the Environmental Protection Agency. 3 Democrats sided with Republicans in Wednesday's vote to confirm Zeldin: Arizona Senators Ruben Gallego and Mark Kelly and Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. The youth climate action group Sunrise Movement condemns Zeldin's confirmation as a disaster for the planet and a win for fossil fuel executives, writing, quote, "He took $420,000 from big oil, pledged to undo climate protections, and has been all in with Trump backing corporate polluters at the expense of working people," they said. Meanwhile, Democratic senators grilled Health and Human Services nominee RFK Jr. at his confirmation hearing Wednesday. We'll have more on the confirmation hearings for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. Also on Wednesday, senators advanced nominations of Pam Bondi for Attorney General and Kelly Loeffler to head the Small Business Administration. Meanwhile, Trump's nominee for Director of National Intelligence, former Hawaii Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, faces an uphill battle to confirmation when she appears before the Senate Intelligence Committee today. Fox News reports Gabbard does not currently have a majority of the votes needed, with half of the committee's Republicans still undecided. We'll also discuss Gabbard with Oregon Senator Ron Wyden. Israel scheduled to free 110 Palestinians, including 30 children, from its prisons after Hamas said it had released 3 Israelis and 5 Thai nationals held hostage in Gaza since October 7, 2023. The exchange took place as Trump's Middle East envoy, the former head of the Inauguration Committee, Steve Witkoff, arrived in Israel and became the first senior American official to enter Gaza in nearly 15 years. Witkoff toured the Israeli-occupied Netzarim corridor separating northern and southern Gaza, embedded among Israeli soldiers. On Wednesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he'd accepted President Trump's invitation to meet at the White House next Tuesday. Also Wednesday, Trump signed an executive order to deport non-citizen college students and other international visitors who take part in pro-Palestinian protests. Trump said in a statement accompanying the order, quote, "I will quickly cancel the student visas of all Hamas sympathizers on college campuses, which have been infested with radicalism like never before," Trump said. In Gaza, Israeli airstrikes have killed 2 Palestinians despite the ceasefire agreement. Separately, an Israeli civilian contractor working with Israel's military in Gaza was shot dead by Israeli soldiers, apparently after being mistaken for a Palestinian. In the occupied West Bank, an Israeli airstrike on the Palestinian town of Tamun late Wednesday killed 10 people and left several other Palestinians wounded. The attack came as Israel's army arrested 26 Palestinians in raids across the occupied West Bank. Separately, Israeli warplanes have fired 2 missiles at a building in Jenin refugee camp earlier today. On Wednesday, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said Israeli forces will remain in the Jenin refugee camp and will continue to occupy additional territory it recently seized in Syria's Golan Heights. This all comes as international staff working for the UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, have been forced to leave their posts after Israel's ban on the agency came into effect earlier today. UNRWA spokesperson Jonathan Fowler said Israel's decision could trigger a collapse of humanitarian aid to Palestinians.
In East Jerusalem, we serve 70,000 patients who are at the sort of bottom of the economic ladder, the most vulnerable members of society, people who don't have access to affordable healthcare alternatives and use our free healthcare system. These people need us. They need these services. It's like a nightmare scenario, and it's also completely outlandish.
A federal judge in Manhattan has sentenced former New Jersey Democratic Senator Bob Menendez to 11 years in prison following his conviction on corruption charges. In July, jurors found Menendez guilty of bribery, wire fraud, extortion, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and acting as a foreign agent for Egypt. He's due to report to prison June 6th. Menendez spoke to reporters following his sentencing Wednesday, stoking speculation he's seeking a pardon from President Trump.
Welcome to the Southern District of New York, the Wild West of political prosecutions. President Trump is right. This process is political and it's corrupted to the core. I hope President Trump cleans up the cesspool and restores the integrity to the system.
And the Justice Department is reportedly in talks with federal prosecutors in Manhattan about dropping corruption charges against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Adams was indicted last year on 5 counts, including bribery, conspiracy, and campaign finance violations. A growing number of Adams' allies have also been indicted or resigned. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world. President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., appeared before the Senate Finance Committee on Wednesday. The confirmation hearing was repeatedly interrupted by protesters criticizing Kennedy's long record of vaccine skepticism. Kennedy is a former environmental attorney who went on to lead Children's Health Defense, a nonprofit that's filed more than 30 lawsuits challenging vaccine and other public health mandates. Kennedy is the son of former Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy and the nephew of President John F. Kennedy. Ahead of the hearing, JFK's daughter, Ambassador Carolyn Kennedy, called on senators to reject her cousin, who she described as a predator and dangerous. Supporters of Kennedy see him as a leading figure in the so-called Make America Healthy Again movement. If confirmed to head HHS, Kennedy would oversee numerous agencies, including the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
In a moment, we'll be joined by Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon, the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee. But first, let's turn to Senator Wyden questioning Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Wednesday.
Mr. Kennedy, you have spent years pushing conflicting stories about vaccines. You say one thing and then you say another. In your testimony today under oath, you denied that you were anti-vaccine. But during a podcast interview in July of 2023, you said, quote, "No vaccine is safe and effective." In your testimony today, in order to prove you're not anti-vax, you note that all your kids are vaccinated. But in a podcast in 2020, you said, and I quote, "You would do anything, pay anything to go back in time and not vaccinate your kids." Mr. Kennedy, all of these things cannot be true. So, are you lying to Congress today when you say you are pro-vaccine? Or did you lie on all those podcasts? We have all of this on tape, by the way.
Yeah, Senator, as you know, because it's been repeatedly debunked, that statement that I made on the Lex Friedman podcast was a fragment of the statement. He asked me, and anybody who actually goes and looks at that podcast and will see this, he asked me, are there vaccines that are safe and effective? And I said to him, some of the live virus vaccines are. And I said, there are no vaccines that are safe and effective, and I was going to continue for every person. Every medicine has people who are sensitive to them, including vaccines.
All right, so
he interrupted me at that point. I've corrected it many times, including on national TV. You know about this, Senator Wyden, so bringing this up right now is dishonest.
let's be clear about what you've actually done then, since you want to deny your statements. For example, you have a history of trying to take vaccines away from people. In May of 2021, you petitioned the Food and Drug Administration to not only block Americans from having access to the COVID vaccine, but to prevent any future access to the life-saving vaccine. Are you denying that? Your name is on the petition.
We brought that petition after CDC recommended the COVID vaccine without any scientific basis for 6-year-old children. Most experts agree today, even the people who did it back then, that COVID vaccines are inappropriate for 6-year-old children who basically have a zero risk from COVID. That's why I brought that lawsuit. I don't want to. I want to emphasize
Mr. Kennedy, the facts.
And to the audience.
That was Democratic Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. He's the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, questioning President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., when he appeared before the committee on Wednesday. That was a brief interruption by a protester. Senator Wyden is joining us now from the Russell Rotunda in the Senate Office Building. He also has a new book just out. It's called It Takes Chutzpah: How to Fight Fearlessly for Progressive Change. Senator, welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. If you can start off by just talking about the significance of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Heading up Health and Human Services, in charge of NIH, in charge of the Centers for Disease Control, agencies that he has long fiercely criticized.
Amy, this is one of the most important positions in the world as it relates to healthcare, because a lot of the decisions we make on medicines and therapies are copied around the world. And I was listening to what you played, and what you heard was vintage Robert Kennedy double talk. You know, he has tried so hard to be anti-vax, and again and again and again, he belongs to organizations, he makes statements and the like. Now he desperately wants this appointment from Donald Trump, so he is trying to pretend that he's pro-vax. I think the reality is that he cannot be trusted, number one, and he's unprepared. And the reason I say unprepared is it was clear yesterday he didn't even understand the Medicaid program. He thought that there were premiums involved, and it was clear that he just didn't understand the architecture of the programs he would run if confirmed.
And Senator Wyden, you've said that he's, quote, embraced conspiracy theories, quacks, and charlatans on vaccine safety and efficacy. What is your assessment on the line of questioning yesterday? Were you satisfied with the number of questions you were able to ask and others were able to ask? And what remains?
I believe my Democratic colleagues were outstanding. They went at all of the issues where he had made these very outlandish statements. He pretends that he didn't. A number of my colleagues looked at the financial links that he benefits from when he's doing all this anti-vax activity. I think that we put on the kind of hearing on our side that puts him on the precipice where possibly he will not be confirmed.
You have his fierce criticism of vaccines, and surprised many, probably, when he said he was not anti-vaccine. But he also has fierce criticism of the agriculture industry, the power of the drug industry. Can you comment on that, where you actually agree with him and where you don't?
Certainly when he talks about tobacco cessation, I was the one who blew the whistle on the tobacco executives lying about the addictiveness of nicotine. I certainly share views with them on matters like that. But on the big crucial kinds of questions. For example, this COVID petition, that would have made it impossible to get out the services that were so needed while we were in the eye of the storm. And his policies, I think, are going to leave Americans sicker.
Senator Wyden, we'd also like to ask you about the White House Budget Office's decision to rescind an order to freeze trillions of dollars of federal grants and loans. The initial order from Matthew Vaith, the acting director of the White House Office of Management and Budget, set off chaos around the country as funding for critical programs, including Medicaid, Head Start, Meals on Wheels, and many others appeared to be in jeopardy. The OMB rescinded the memo after a federal judge in Washington, D.C. temporarily halted the radical plan. This all comes as Trump has nominated the architect of Project 2025, Russell Vought, to head the OMB. During his recent confirmation hearing, Vought was questioned by our guest, by you, Democratic Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon.
I think the distillation of the Trump economic program is to give tax breaks to all the people at the top, and it's going to be paid for by these kinds of cuts in efficient health care programs like Medicaid and hunger programs and the like. And I'd like to know, does that concern you at all, that we have these values that are going to help the people right at the top, at the tippy top of the top, and we're going to cut these programs like Medicaid and hunger? Are those your values? Do you think that that's something that is in line with American values? Because I think we want everybody to have a chance to get ahead.
Senator, I fully support the notion that we want everyone to get ahead, and we would not characterize our economic program that way. We think it's important to give people tax cuts at all levels. The president wants to extend those tax cuts.
But what about the vulnerable people who are going to get hurt in the process?
So that was Democratic Senator Ron Wyden questioning OMB nominee Russell Vought. I mean, total chaos this week. You have the President Trump proposing to cut trillions of dollars from programs to the neediest Americans. And then, because of enormous outcry, he pulls back. And you are leading the charge, Senator Wyden, to call for a postponement of the vote on Russell Vought to be the head of OMB. Can you talk about him as one of the key architects of Project 2025 and what that is, and why you're calling for this delay?
There is no question in my mind that this is a person who has got a laser target out there for Medicaid. Medicaid, of course, is a lifeline for millions of people. And in fact, one of the things that was good this week that happened is when we heard that Donald Trump was going to cause bedlam in the Medicaid portals, the activists who are supportive of Medicaid got in touch with me. I put it online, and all over America, so many people spoke out against Trump's efforts to cause harm to Medicaid. We blocked it within 12 hours. So we're going to be all in this fight, and Russell Vought is the architect of it. The Project 2025 effort features a number of key kinds of questions, but this is his big victory that he wants to accomplish.
So what do you accomplish by postponing the vote?
What we do is we give a chance for more people to see what's at stake. It's kind of like, Donald Trump has consistently not paid the bills that he owed when he was in the private sector. So a judge basically caught up with him, and that's how we helped to block the freeze. We're going to get the word out just as I did when the Medicaid portals were closed down there for a few hours. What happened was those activists and those whistleblowers got in touch with me. I put it out all across the country. The credit deserves to go to the whistleblowers who brought it to us. We get additional time. We can block these cuts too.
And Senator Ron Wyden, could you also comment on the confirmation hearing forthcoming for Tulsi Gabbard to become Director of National Intelligence? You've worked with her in the past on privacy legislation, but you've expressed some concerns about her potentially occupying this position. If you could elaborate.
I'd like to find out what her current positions are on matters like the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which is a hugely important issue. At one time, she was against it. Now she seems that she may be for it. I'm also very concerned about Americans being swept up in these searches. So we're going to get to the bottom of what her positions actually are. And clearly the Trump people have been lobbying her hard.
If you could talk more about that, because Senator Wyden, you are known as a leader on challenging these FISA courts. For those who aren't so familiar, we have a global audience. Explain your deep concerns, how she agreed with you as a Congress member, and then how she's turned around.
Well, what I think she was concerned about was law-abiding Americans getting swept up in the warrant process. And I have led that effort, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today. But I think on top of that, she is concerned that civil liberties are just getting the short shrift. You know, I believe that security and liberty are not mutually exclusive. You can have both. You can have your freedoms and have security. I think she said that in the past. The question is, will she say it again today?
Senator Wyden, could we also ask you about, you've commented on this, the fact that at the Trump's inauguration, there were all of the leading tech CEOs, from Zuckerberg to Sundar Pichai, and of course Elon Musk, who is now formerly a member of Trump's administration. You've done a great deal of work on tech. What are your concerns about the proximity of these tech CEOs to the Trump administration?
Well, it clearly sent a message that his real friends, his real allies are the billionaires. Let me tell your listeners, though, I think that what Mark Zuckerberg did, toadying up to Trump here recently and saying he'd give up his fact checkers, was just god-awful. And I think what it does is it sends a message to all the big tech companies, hey, you can do what I did, maybe line up a favor in the future with Donald Trump, and we can reconsolidate big media the way it was before the internet.
I wanted to go back to our headlines, Senator Wyden, to our first story. Of course, this horrendous crash, midair crash over the Potomac between a Black Hawk helicopter and this American Airlines flight. It looks like there are absolutely no survivors. At least 30 bodies have been pulled. It's American Airlines. The crash coming just days after the head of the Federal Aviation Administration, Mike Whitaker, stepped down. Now, this is extremely significant. FAA administrators usually serve 5-year terms. Trump has not named a replacement. Whitaker announced his planned departure in December after SpaceX CEO and Trump donor Elon Musk repeatedly attacked him on social media, attacked Whitaker, saying he needs to resign. I mean, on the one hand, the power of the richest man on earth working with Trump, and we don't know what happened here. We cannot say why they crashed. It is so rare to have this kind of collision. Horrific. But if you can comment on this.
Well, I'm certainly concerned about the Trump administration's policies as it relates to ensuring that we have adequate personnel to prevent this. This is such a horrifying story that we have gotten this morning, the tragic loss of life. And I will tell you, there are going to be a host of questions. One of the first that I asked myself this morning is, what was that DOD helicopter doing in that particular place? And so we've got to make sure that we have the adequate personnel to prevent this in the future and get to the bottom of what these decisions in terms of the Trump personnel in the last few weeks have meant.
We know you have to go in just about a minute. You've got the Tulsi Gabbard hearing coming up. But we did want to ask you about your new book, It Takes Chutzpah. And the subtitle is How to Fight Fearlessly for Progressive Change. Many are questioning, where is the Democratic Party today? Where is the response to the enormous, what many people would say might be the majority of people in this country,